This video is brought to you by me, because I have a new song out. Check it out, it's really pretty. So, I'm not a gamer. I don't play games. I enjoy thinking about them. I love reading and learning about them, but I don't really play them anymore. I grew up with stuff like Super Smash Bros. Melee and Pikmin and Star Fox Adventures. Yeah, that one that everyone hated. I think it's really fun. But gaming has been increasingly intriguing to me as a person obsessed with storytelling. Despite what some people might say, this is clearly a valid artistic medium, and for a long time I've been on the lookout for an experience that would be broad enough and accessible enough and to thoroughly immerse and entertain me, a person who doesn't play games. Uncharted is the first game that has managed to convince me to pick up a controller for something that wasn't in my childhood. I didn't already have nostalgia points that could bring me back to it. I never had a PlayStation. I had no idea who Nathan Drake was. So this video is going to be for people like me who aren't that interested in playing video games but want to experience a fresh new form of storytelling. Because Uncharted 4 is the game I've been waiting for. This is going to be incredibly subjective, so I hope you watch this video with an open mind, with the underlying knowledge that I don't really know what I'm talking about, and I'm coming at this as an outsider of the medium. Before I picked up Uncharted 4, I bought the Nathan Drake collection, the remastered edition of all 3 previous entries. I did this because I felt I needed some sort of larger context for the story, which both is and isn't true. The original trilogy has way more emphasis on character expression rather than character development. And of course the giant action set pieces that are so cool and really fun and sell the game. It's still an experience, and it's probably worth playing for the iconic moments alone, but it's not what I was hoping for. Overall though, I think it does benefit playing these games if you want Uncharted 4 in its purest form. So if you're bad at shooters or find combat really boring, Naughty Dog included a difficulty setting titled Explorer. Now, I've just lost all my credibility by even mentioning this difficulty option, let alone recommending it, but I played the trilogy on easy mode, and I can easily say it was the best experience that I could have had. I tried playing on a harder difficulty at first, but my experience was plagued with moments of frustration, where I had to play sections over and over until I learned where enemies were and the correct path forward. Not only that, I was looking through most of the game through a black and white filter. Easy mode gave me much more variety in my options. I could jump from cover to cover and experiment a lot. Create little stories for myself of how I bravely charged through gunfire to punch someone in the face. If I had played the whole game on crushing, I would have spent the whole game ducked behind cover and traveling back in time like Groundhog Day until I was an omnipotent god. I made all the right decisions because I've played this 50 times and I know exactly how it's gonna go. As a result, I felt more connected to the character, not approaching a situation knowing where all the enemies are. Enemies also take less hits to die on easy, which made me feel way less awful about how many bullets I was riddling hundreds of men with. All in all, I really enjoyed it. There's several cutscenes that do a great job of showing character relationships and supernaturalistic performances that make them feel like real people. Aw, they still really care about each other. I can see it and feel it. In Uncharted 1 and 2, Nathan Drake is a careless, childish man who recklessly puts himself in danger to find hidden treasures all across the globe. He's likable and he's witty. I'd love to have a beer with him, but I do not trust this guy. He was kind of lacking other dimensions to him. I didn't really understand why he was this way. Then Uncharted 3 comes in and you start playing as him as a kid, and he's acting the exact same way, and it clicks! This guy has always been alone. He's never had any other way of life and is really immature as a result. Drake is a big kid because he's always been one. This is a really simple way to add a lot of context to a character. His immaturity is probably why his relationship with Elena has fallen apart twice.
You just didn't have the nerve to face me again.
I knew you would react like this.
Immaturity puts a thick barrier between a person and adult commitment. Nathan Drake can't quite let go of the one thing that has always given him joy. Adventuring is such a volatile way of life, but it's where he feels safe. Stability probably scares him a lot. But at the end of Uncharted 3, after nearly losing his best friend, he decides to get back with Elena and try really hard to make it work. And that's where Uncharted 4 picks up. Okay, bear in mind again, I'm not a critic. I'm not judging this game from very high standards. I went in expecting an action game with interesting characters and a compelling story that ties it all together. And I got that in a big way. Before the game even starts, Naughty Dog has already made a really strong decision about his character, and probably my favorite one I've ever seen in a video game. At some point after Uncharted 3, Nathan decides to pack it all up and settle down with the person he truly loves. I am so in love with this choice, it makes me want to explode. Drake is trying to grow the hell up, get a decent job in the city and live a normal life. But this isn't actually what he wants to do. Nathan is still a kid at heart. He's just doing what he thinks he's supposed to be doing as an adult. For the sake of his relationship, he's overcommitted to an idea of what growing up is, what his life should be. This feels so incredibly human to me. When you're trying to change, sometimes you just overcorrect. I totally buy that this man-child would just strap into a domestic life and expect it to work out. He's so afraid of being sucked back into adventuring. In his mind, that would be going backwards. So he got to avoid it. He's so committed to this that he refuses any small opportunity to make it part of his life again, not even accepting a really exciting salvaging job in Malaysia because there's no legal paperwork. I could picture him lying awake being like, I want to do it, but it's a slippery slope. But his wife, Elena, being more mature than Nathan, really wants him to take this job. She can clearly see how this life decision is affecting him and also how he's lying to himself about it. Elena is my favorite character in the series for this. She loves this guy so much, but shows a lot of emotional maturity in her love, getting very justifiably upset to him when he starts lying to her, but giving him every opportunity to not do that. She's not stupid. Nathan is. The reason their relationship has conflict in this story is because Nathan Drake is still a very flawed character. He's grown a lot, but there's still a lot of work to do here, which is how any great character story should be fleshed out in a sequel. Naughty Dog took really likable characters and actually made them into well-written ones. And this is when I realized that Uncharted 4 is a post-Last of Us game. Yeah, it's really hard to talk about Uncharted 4 without talking about The Last of Us, the last game the studio made. Even as a person outside of the gaming world, I still know everything about it. It was a watershed game and it kind of changed everything. Stories in games have existed way before 2013, but now there is a benchmark to point towards, a bar that has been set that every game attempting a serious story will be inevitably compared to. It was a game that took human moments and let them breathe with space and delicacy. Playing Uncharted 1, 2, and 3, and then the huge leap in 4, it very much felt like a pre and post Last of Us era. One huge carryover is the triangle dialogue prompt. We don't just get character development at the end of levels, now we get them throughout as we're exploring and playing. Pretty sizable character beats happen just while you're playing the game and walking around, which lets us spend a lot more time with them, which is in turn gonna make us care about them more, especially for one particular gameplay section, which we'll get to. The team clearly learned a lot from The Last of Us, and brought all of this emotional intelligence and new narrative technique to Uncharted. Now the Uncharted characters are written not in just consistency, but with justification. We know that Nathan and Elena are attracted to each other and enjoy each other's company, but in post The Last of Us, there's a real attempt to make this relationship human and believable. Getting a look at their domestic life is a big key player in this. Nathan may be miserable doing paperwork all the time, but he's happy with her. And this relationship is the heart and soul of the game to me. Henry Avery and Sam's stuff is all a framework for the backdrop of the story of Nathan Drake maturing and saving his marriage. Wow, sounds insane, right? I can't believe that a sequel story to a blockbuster action franchise fleshes out a romantic relationship like this. It's not a common thing. Most of the time in movie sequels, there's an off-screen breakup, or the relationship just doesn't really change at all. And sometimes the romantic lead is just killed off in the first 10 minutes. I always see this as a cop-out, because it takes a lot of effort to try and flesh out a relationship rather than building a new one or abruptly ending it. That trope really annoys me, and it got subverted in a video game, which was a pleasant surprise. The troubles in their relationship aren't a sign that he needs to get the hell away from her. It's simply a pivotal moment in their marriage that ends with them growing even closer. That's mature. That's an honest human story that does not feel contrived in any way. Uncharted 4 is a much smaller game in a lot of ways. It's smaller. It's a lot smaller. Like, okay, I know it looks huge, but it's a smaller story. I'm of the opinion that a character does not have to lose everything in order to be properly challenged by a story. Yeah, losing Elena would be a very simple way to challenge the protagonist, but a bigger undertaking, and one that would stay with me, would be a hero being tested and proving that they have the capacity to change and become a good person, and then being rewarded for that. It's a good feeling. It just feels good to watch, and it sets this story apart from a lot of action genre stuff. In order to explain how this game does that, though, I need to rattle off some plot points. So Nathan had a brother this whole time. He shows up out of nowhere and says he needs some help to pay off a debt by stealing the treasure of Henry Avery, a legendary pirate captain. Nathan, having backed himself into a corner, forcing himself to live this suburban, boring life, suddenly has the perfect excuse to go off on another adventure. But He's terrified. He cannot tell his wife. They've been in a lot of dangerous situations before, and he knows exactly how she deals with them. She'll be worried, and she may come after him and put herself in danger. I love this choice. It reveals so much about Nathan's character. See, he won't do an off-the-books job that his wife is actively encouraging him to do, but he will take a much more dangerous and illegal mission to help his brother, and won't tell his wife. That's so interesting. Why does he do that? Maybe the secrecy is adding something to it. Maybe it's having his wife encouraging the Malaysia job that makes it less enticing to him. And breaking the rules is part of why he fell in love with adventuring in the first place. But more importantly, he needs to do this to save his brother. This is much higher stakes than salvaging something in Malaysia. And Nathan clearly values helping people that he cares about way more than the simple act of adventuring. This not only lines up with what we know about him, but it reveals more of his character. He's making a big mistake here, but for very specific emotional reasons, and not just one reason.
The biggest pirate treasure of all time is within our grasp.
I thought this was about saving Sam.
It is. I mean, come on, it's both, right?
He's doing it to save his brother, but he also likes the adventure, but really it's about his brother. So he's lying to himself in a believable way. That's a three-dimensional character, and I like him way more because of it. I'm playing the game now because I want to see him grow and mature and learn from this mistake. And I'm hoping to God that he and Elena won't break up again. Now Nathan goes on his adventure, and we have a lot of gameplay. I really like the gameplay in Uncharted. As a person who doesn't play many games, it's very nice to have very few controls to memorize. You point, you shoot, you climb, you move with the L stick most of the game. But as I played, I could feel a lot of what I've heard about these games. That it's an illusion that you're doing something. You're actually just pressing one button and a movie is playing for you. That is a lot of how this game is structured. Naughty Dog, though, puts a lot of effort into the visuals and the context in which you're doing it so that this illusion sort of clicks into place, where you're so immersed in it that all the strings kind of disappear in your peripheral vision. But Naughty Dog made a couple improvements that I really liked. Some of the action scenes that happened were very connected to the game mechanics. Several times you have to use a cable to like strap a tree to your car so you can drive up a hill, and one time when you do it, you're actively playing this gameplay segment and the cable dislodges a rock and suddenly you're flying and like, whoa shit, and you're like, I got myself into this situation. It tricks you and it uses game mechanics to make that happen. But there's one particular moment where this completely drew me in. It's such a small moment compared to all the other big things that happened, but it really did something kind of profound for me.
It's the bit where you hop in the car and fucking whip the grappling hook onto the truck you're chasing, you fly under the bridge, you have to dodge all this shit, and you crash through some wooden planks, you have to climb up the rope and get onto the car, and suddenly you're in this crazy convoy shootout where you're driving and shooting people at the same time.
It was this split second right here. I was driving, I ran out of road, and I saw the L bumper button. Functionally, this was just a QuickTime event, but the button mapping made all the difference. It was in my muscle memory that when I want to launch the grappling hook, I press this one button. So when I saw that Drake needed to use it, I got to press it, and now this whole scene is happening. It's super basic to lay it all out like that, but that experience made me jump out of my seat and go, woohoo! It was a moment of synergy with me and Nathan Drake, where all the walls of the game design completely fell away. That simple design decision made it click for a very brief moment, and I had perhaps the biggest thrill I've ever experienced playing a video game. I will remember that shit forever. So from this point, I'm going to spoil the rest of the story. If I've convinced you to play this game, go ahead and play it. The way the story resolves is pretty unique and interesting, and I think it's worth playing. So eventually, Elena catches him in his lie, and it is brutal. He has done something without his wife's consent that betrays a really intimate part of their relationship. He's been unfaithful. This scene plays out like he's been cheating on her because it's the same emotional center. You went and did this. You knowingly endangered our relationship. How dare you?
I had to protect you.
That is bullshit, Nate. You just didn't have the nerve to face me again.
Oof, this isn't the first time they've had that fight. Maybe that's the reason they broke up all those times. This fight is a really necessary beat for the story, but it also lets Elena's three-dimensionality rear its head again. It's not just the fact that he's lying to her. Elena, again being more emotionally mature than Nathan, can see that he is lying to himself and isn't acknowledging it.
If you're done lying to me, then you should stop lying to yourself.
This scene is her coming to terms with the fact that she's married to someone who isn't mature enough for her. In order to win her back, he's gonna have to fundamentally change. So the narrative question becomes, can Nathan really grow up? But he's not able to do that right now because the weight of Sam's life is hanging over him. Now, Sully is more mature than him. He can see exactly what Nathan needs to do right now and offers up a bunch of different solutions. But Nathan's like, can you just shut up, man? He's not emotionally equipped to process things that quickly because he's still immature. The emotional stakes then are huge because he's proving himself himself to be immature, and that means that their relationship won't work out. It's likely he's going to be stuck in this life of crime forever. This scene is showcasing one of the toughest parts about growing up. Wanting to act like an adult, but not finding yourself able to be one.
Hey, you want to be helpful, Sullivan? Go keep an eye on her.
You two adults go and sort it out so that I can focus on what's important to me. So Nathan and Sam go by themselves after the treasure. There's a really wonderful scene where Sam tries to goad Nathan to getting excited about the treasure again. But Nathan, surprisingly, isn't very receptive to it. After having some time to process it, we can see that the fight actually had an impact on him. Nathan's desire to go after the treasure for its own sake has pretty much been squashed now. He is only doing this for Sam, which is perfectly timed for the reveal that Sam's a little bitch! Sam Drake... Sam's been fucking lying to him this whole time. He's not in trouble from Alcazar, his life is not on the line, he just wants to get the treasure. Sam Drake is very similar to Nathan. He functions in the story as a mirror for him. In a lot of ways, he is who Nathan could have turned out to be if he hadn't met Elena. An immature liar who can't even be honest with his brother, and who will probably get himself killed one day. Now, he's a shithead, but it's not really his fault. He's been locked in a cell for like 15 years. He's not been given any of the opportunities that Nathan has to forge a better life for himself. He's just been laser focused on this idea of something that'll make him happy, which is kind of how Nathan has been until he met Elena. Remember back in Uncharted 1 after Elena had paid for their entire expedition, then they just fucking ditch her on the dock? That's Sam energy. But this revelation gives Nathan a unique insight into how Elena must be feeling about him. This guy's an asshole. He doesn't really love me. Oh, fuck. So this revelation is doing a lot of things at once. It's showing us that Sam's way of life is not a good one. There's more to life than treasure hunting. If you make that your entire identity, you end up betraying the ones you love. It also teaches Nathan that if he continues down this path without changing, he could lose everything. And finally, it takes away any excuse Nathan has to continue lying to himself. With Sam's lie revealed, he can actually ask himself why he went on this escapade. Bad guy tries to kill Nathan, Sam jumps in the way, and Nathan falls off a cliff. He's at his lowest point. He's pushed away his best friend. His brothers betrayed him. He's alone on this island. Who does he have left?
The best wife ever!
Elena comes back and nurses his wound and then begins the most realistic set of conversations I've ever played in a game. With Sam's lie revealed, he can now talk honestly with her.
Normal lies!
This is not a misunderstanding. He did something very purposefully and has to be open with her to get at why it happened. And Elena, being the most supportive person you could ever ask for in this situation, takes the time to understand her husband and help him understand himself. You play through a level where you're exploring and working with Elena to try and go after Sam, and while interacting with her and using Naughty Dog's signature triangle dialogue prompts, she puts in so much emotional labor to challenge him, and that allows Nathan to face her and in turn face himself.
Afraid of what?
Losing you. I guess I was, protecting myself. You know?
He loves adventuring. He needs it. It's a big part of who he is. And he's sad that he's not able to do it anymore. And he doesn't know how to reconcile with that and his desire to be with her. He's afraid. I am so goddamn inspired by this emotional labor she takes on to help her husband become a better person. She didn't need to do this. The only reason someone would do this is if you were so in love with them and you knew you could get through it together. If I was in her position, I cannot say I would do the same thing.
She's my fucking hero! I really hope that if I'm ever put in this situation, I can act with as much grace as she does.
Conflict doesn't have to be cut and dry. Good and bad. You did bad thing and you must be punished or absolve an entire part of yourself. Elena doesn't get an I told you so moment. She also has to reckon with the fact that adventuring is part of his life, and he needs to have that to be happy. Nathan obviously needs to grow the hell up, and he does a lot in this scene. But when confronted with who her husband is growing up to be, she needs to learn his true mature needs. Nathan, free from all the bullshit of Sam's lie and his lie to Elena and his lie to himself, just takes a moment with this room and explaining what happened here and why it's so fascinating to him. And Elena sees him in his most honest projection of himself, and in this moment, it's so good. It's been talked about to death, but it's so fucking good because you can see it on her face. She's understanding who her husband truly is. Through this set of dialogue conversations, they're learning how to truly be husband and wife together. It's so romantic. Uncharted 4's story is simple, but it's littered with all of these nice touches of characters really genuinely understanding each other. Basically, the conflict isn't boring. The resolution to this story is taking the time to understand, forgive, and find a way to move forward. That kind of resolution shows a lot of character strength for someone like Elena, and a lot of emotional intelligence in the writing. I think this section is where the influence of The Last of Us really rears its head. It's a gameplay section between two characters who have a very complicated relationship, and you are helping each other get through it. But while in The Last of Us it's just about strengthening their relationship, here it's about resolving a real conflict in it. And going through the level, you are working together with Elena to reach your goal. You're actively solving problems as you go, and in between talking about your relationship, which is such a nice metaphor. It's emotional and physical labor. In the action genre, we're really oversaturated with stories of characters learning to like each other, and we rarely see depictions of the struggles of relationships. And most of the time when it's attempted, it's not done that well, mostly focused on trivial stuff like misunderstandings and characters acting irrationally over extraordinary circumstances that don't really get at the core of who they are. Basically, they run through a rough patch, but then they're okay again. Everything's back to the way it was, which is fine. Those films are about more than just the relationship, but I've been increasingly hungry for something a little more emotionally honest, to actually sit down and think about how this relationship needs to change in order to progress and grow stronger. These are much more intimate circumstances to be dealing with as a writer, and I really got emotionally moved by this. There's one particular scene. It's in the middle of the fight. They're having this really tough conversation.
No matter what it is, you're supposed to come to me so that we can work through it together as a team.
I know that. Really, I do. It's just...
We should stay focused. There'll be time for this later.
You get in the car, and a piece of music starts playing.
Next stop, New Devon.
This quiet moment driving with her, I fucking cried. I don't know why. I was overwhelmed with so much strong, believable character development and a downright inspiring love story. Driving through a beautiful jungle with beautiful music and two beautiful characters. I cried. This is maturity. Growing, changing, running into challenges, and then overcoming them with grace.
I'm sorry.
It's okay.
So a whole bunch of other stuff happens and you kill a whole bunch of people. You get some lovely moments where Elena is showing that she has a lot of capability. And you finally catch up with Sam. And everyone on the crew is gearing up to just get the hell out of there. But Sam really wants to keep doing it. He still wants to go after the treasure. And Nathan gets to face this version of himself and say, no, it's time for us to grow the hell up. There's a really lovely moment where Sam says they don't get it. And Nate gets to say,
Actually, Sam, they do. Really do.
He's finally proving his maturity. Sometimes other people do know what's best for you, people who are more mature than you. You can't push them away in search of your desired goals in order to keep playing, to have more fun.
We're not those kids anymore.
But turns out Sam is not mature enough for this either. He reacts in the same way Nathan did when Elena called him out.
I'm sorry. Sam! Sam!
And so Nathan gets to perform exactly what Elena did for him just hours earlier. He goes after him and saves his life. In this act, Nathan shows as much grace towards his brother that Elena did for him. So essentially, Nathan has reached Elena's maturity level. He's done it. He's reached the heights of his amazing wife. He reaches the ship, has a big sword fight, and then murders another person. And Nathan, once again, loses the fucking treasure. But this time at a choice. And after being honest with his wife, they can now finally work together to build an honest life for themselves. Elena, having seen how important adventuring is to her husband and to herself, buys the salvaging company and sets up the Malaysia job legally. They're going to have this as part of their lives. They're not going to live a boring, stupid life that's a dumbhead move, which Elena would be okay with, but Nathan has learned that he needs this, and they both get to move on to a life they both deeply want. Not what they think it should be, but one that fulfills both of their needs as husband and wife.
What happened to just living a normal life?
When I was on that island, I missed the adventure. I missed us. And so now we have a chance to do what we love.
When the director of the original trilogy, Amy Hennig, won a writing award for Uncharted 2, she had this to say, which I found really interesting.
If you were to chart the progress of the game industry against the timeline of film history, we would just be entering the era of the talkies. We're just still wobbling on our training wheels, if you know what I mean.
Games are leagues behind film's narrative achievements. They've had less time to flesh out how they tell their stories. And I think looking at games from the lens of film does them a total disservice. Pretty much every modern narrative game that comes out does something a little bit better than the last. Each game is a small stepping stone, and we're getting to a really interesting place, and I'm so excited to see where that's going. But Uncharted 4, damn near close to being truly great. I had so much fun with this game, and I took something really special from it for myself for a very personal reason. So if you don't play video games, if you've never played Uncharted, play it on easy. Experience this narrative journey, a very small step towards a truly great Citizen Kane of video games. I'm gonna remember this game forever. Whenever the next best story in a video game comes out, I'm always gonna know that this was a very key player in that. Anyway, thanks for watching this video. I've been Ben from Canada, and this was my first ever video about a video game. I'd love it if you could check out my song, because I worked really hard on it, and I think it's really pretty and fun. I also have a Patreon where I post this stuff really early. I had a lot of fun talking about a video game. Maybe I'll do another one. Leave a recommendation in the comments of more games that I should check out that have focus on narrative, because Uncharted may have just gotten me back into video games. Thanks, guys. I love you all. Hug your friends and learn to be better people. Like this game. I love you. Bye.